Okay, yes, so first lunchtime lessons class of 2021, talking about New Year's resolutions. And the first thing to say to you all, which I don't think I have actually said it yet, is happy 2021. So I hope that the year started well. Got off to a bit of a bumpy start here with a lockdown. But yes, I hope that you're doing well in yourselves and there's not too much anxiety or stress or depression or anything going on. Yeah, so I hope you're keeping well. So let's begin by thinking about what a New Year's resolution is. Yeah. So a New Year's resolution, it's a decision that we make at the start of the year, generally to kind of improve ourselves, improve an aspect about our life. And I was wondering what you think the most common New Year's resolutions were in the UK last year in 2020. So if you put your answers in the chat box for me, what do you think were the most common New Year's resolutions? So the most common, the number one most common New Year's resolution last year was doing more exercise or improving your fitness. Number 2 was losing weight. And number 3 was saving money and improving diet. So those were like together in the top 3. What about in your country? Are there like really, really common ones that people do in your country? Okay, so when we talk about New Year's resolutions, there's 3 really common phrasal verbs that will appear with that. And we're going to have a look at those and the meaning. So the first one that comes up a lot is give up. The other one that comes up a lot with New Year's resolutions is take up. And another phrasal verb that comes up a lot is cut down on. Okay, cut down or cut down on something. Yeah. So what do these mean, guys? Give up. I'm sure you've probably seen this with this kind of sentence, right? I'm going to give up smoking. So that means to stop doing something, especially something that you do regularly. And generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, it's a bad habit. So you give up smoking, you give up eating hamburgers, okay? You don't really like give up eating carrots because carrots are good for you unless there's more of a negative consequence to it, right? So I'm going to give up eating carrots because I always feel really bad after I do it, okay? Or sometimes you're forced to give up something that you like, oh, I had to give up my French classes even though I really enjoyed them because I had no money. So there's usually like a bit of a negative aspect in general connected to it. If we think of a synonym for the word give up, stop would be a very slightly simplistic one, but a good synonym to work with. Take up, guys, so that would be like, I've decided to take up painting as a new hobby. So this means to become interested in a new activity and also to spend time doing that activity. So you could think of this as a synonym of start, okay? And then the last one that we saw there was cut down on something. So that would be like, I need to cut down on coffee. I'm drinking too much of it. Anyone feel that way? So what you're doing with cut down is you're eating, you're drinking, or using less of something. And very often it's in order to improve your health, okay? So you don't stop completely. It's not the same as give up. So if I give up smoking, I don't smoke anymore. But if I cut down on my smoking, I smoke 10 cigarettes instead of 20 cigarettes, okay? And you can think of this as a synonym of reduce, right? So we've got 3 nice phrasal verbs here, okay? So give up, synonym of stop, take up, synonym of start, and cut down, synonym of reduce, yeah? We use on with cut down when we're saying what. So I would say I'm cutting down on coffee, but I have to cut down, okay? So we're only using on if we're using the object. Okay, so I want you to think of something you intend to do this year, right? So I want you to think of something you intend to give up, something you intend to take up, and something you intend to cut down on, okay? So just take a minute, write down a little note. And also, guys, remember, if we're using phrasal verbs, we always follow this with a gerund, right? So I give up smoking, not give up smoke or give up to smoke, okay? I take up running, not take up run. And that's because in all of these cases, we need to follow with an object, and the verb here is functioning as a noun. So remember that mantra, right? When I use a verb to function as a noun, I need to use the gerund. So now what I want you to do is I want you to think how you would tell your friend about your intention. How would you put that in a sentence, right? And write that down for me. So how do you communicate to them what you're going to give up? I am blah, 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 blah. Give up smoking. How would you use that? Thinking about, let me give you 2 examples, right? Which one would you say? I'm going to give up eating burgers every day. Or I'll give up eating burgers every day. Which do you think is a better way to express your intention? The first one or the second one? The correct answer is I'm going to give up eating burgers every day, right? But why? Why is that a better option? What we need to think about here, guys, and this is really important for you to learn, in English, there is no future tense, right? It's not like in a Latin-based language where you have a nice formula and you transform your verb and that just expresses a future tense. We don't have that in English. What we have are lots of different structures which will express different aspects, okay? And it's not actually just about the future. We only really have 2 tenses in English, and that is present simple and past simple, because the verb can transform independently without an auxiliary verb. So in the present simple, I have the third person S, and in the past simple, I can make either the irregular past or the ed endings of verbs. Everything else that we do in English needs an auxiliary to help, okay? So what that means is that we use different structures to express different aspects, and we quite often recycle those structures to have different meanings, okay? So we always need to think about the context that we're using the language in, and we need to think about what function or what aspect we want to express. And that's where you're going to use the correct structure, okay? So it's not that I use going to or will to express to as a future tense. It's not that. It's that we use them to communicate different functions about the future, yeah? So there's lots of different ways that we can express the future too. We can talk about the present simple or the present continuous, okay? Or modal verbs, but we're not going to talk about those today. We're just going to focus today on will and going to, because these are the 2 that tend to be confused the most. So if we think about going to first, we use going to express plans and intentions. So for predictions based on what you observe. Okay, I'm going to give you examples for all of these. All right, so if I say I'm going to give up eating burgers, that would be an intention. Yeah, it's what I intend to do. If I say we're getting married in June, it's my plan. Okay. And if I say it's going to rain today, that's my observation, it's my prediction, sorry, that I've based on an observation. So I've probably seen the news and the weather report told me that it's going to rain, or I look up at the clouds and I see that they're really grey and they're going to rain, or, you know, you live in Scotland, so you know that it's going to happen all the time, right? Will, however, we use for promises, like I'll do my homework, Claire, okay? We use it for predictions, but they're based on what you expect. So I would say John will be late, because in my experience, my friend John is always late, right? If I take the example of the weather, yeah, I would say December or January, let's say, because we're in January. January in Scotland is going to be cold because I read the newspaper and it told me. But if I've lived in Scotland for a year, I already know that January is cold. So I'll say January will be cold, okay? Because it's my experience. Don't worry too much about that with predictions, guys. It's not a huge thing. They're fairly interchangeable. There's bigger issues that we need to think about with will or going to. We use will to express offers. So that means like, I'll help you, okay? And we also use will to express an instant decision. So a good way to think about an instant decision is if you're in a restaurant and you look at the menu and you decide in that moment what you're going to eat, right? So if I look at the menu and say, I'll have the soup, because I decide right then. Okay. Now, if we think about these functions, which are usually taught as the future, yeah, how many of those are actually related to the future? Okay, so a promise probably has a relation to the future. A prediction, of course, has a relation to a future. But an offer or an instant decision isn't necessarily about the future, right? It could just be talking about right now. So we usually think of will as this way of expressing future, but quite often it's actually relating more to something that's happening now rather than far in advance. And also, I want you to think, guys, when you started studying English, what was the first way you learned to express the future? What was the first thing they taught you? Okay, because in my experience, students are usually taught will first, yeah? But when we talk about the future, what do we normally talk about? If you're telling your friends what's happening next week, I mean, what are you talking about? Are you talking about promises? Not really, right? Like if we talk about the future, we're usually talking about plans. So if I tell you, oops, sorry, that came up too soon. If I tell you, you know, next week I'm going to go and see my friend, or this year I'm going to work really hard, right? So usually when we're, the most common thing we use when we talk about future is to talk about plans or to talk about intentions, okay? And if we're doing that, we shouldn't be using will, because will is not to talk about our plans. So normally in the classroom, what I get my students to do at this point is get a big piece of paper and in big letters write, will is never for plan, okay? Coming back to the point that I was making before, why do you think we need to use going to talk about our New Year's resolutions? Think about the functions, because it's an intention, yeah? So I said at the beginning, what do you intend to do this year? Okay, right, now before we finish, I want us to go through the pronunciation, because this is a really important aspect to think about as well. When we speak quickly, we make a lot of contractions with both going to and will, and we need to work on that and develop that. So I'm going to let you, don't turn your microphones on, you can just practice, but please say it out loud with me, okay? So when we talk about going to, we generally say, if we're speaking quickly and fluently, gonna, okay? So sometimes people see that written down, yeah? In song lyrics, for example, you'll see G-O-N-N-A, gonna. It's commonly written in song lyrics, things like that. If you are doing anything in terms of writing, which is not a text message or a status update, please do not write gonna, okay? And if you're doing an exam, don't even like consider it, right? Do not write it for me, please. But the reason that it's written like that so much is that it demonstrates how common that pronunciation is, okay? So when we say gonna, it's both the words, right? Going and to come together. So it would sound like this, okay? So if I say slowly, I'm going to give up eating burgers, when I say that quickly, going to and give up are going to connect and become one sound, okay? So it's going to be, I'm going to give up. I'm going to give up eating burgers, yeah? What's that song? Never gonna give you up. Never gonna let you down. Never gonna desert you. Okay. All right. So what we're doing here is we've got our, think of going to as your auxiliary here, okay, and give up as your main verb, and it's just coming together, and it's going to be one block of sound, okay? I'm going to give up eating burgers, right? Good. A mistake that students sometimes make is I'm gonna to, okay? I'm gonna to give up. No. So remember, gonna is both of the sounds going to, yeah? If we put it into a question, it would be the same, right? What are you going to give up? What are you going to give up this year? Okay, what are you going to give up? Now, will also has contractions as well, guys. What we do with will is that we will always contract that onto the subject, okay? So what I mean by that, when we're writing, we only contract on the subject pronouns, okay? So in written English, if you make a contraction, I will would look like that, I'll, yeah? And we can write that contraction. And it sounds like this, okay? So I'm going to go through them and you guys can repeat with me. I'll, you'll, he'll, she'll, it'll, we'll, they'll. Okay? But we need to remember as well that we're going to have our verb, right? So you need to make that block of sound. So if I said, for example, I will cut down, all of that's going to become one block of sound. I'll cut down, you'll cut down, he'll cut down, she'll cut down, it'll cut down, we'll cut down, they'll cut down. Okay? This is a really important thing to work with, guys, these contractions, all right? And I'll explain why in a second. So when we're writing English, we can write the contraction of will this way. But when we speak, it's not only on the subject pronouns, okay? When we speak, we contract on every subject that we have. So what do I mean? Okay, so if I have this sentence, guys, Claire will be late. I don't write the contraction because it looks horrible. Yeah, look at that. Doesn't look nice. Yep. So we don't write the contraction, but I say the contraction. So I'll say, Claire will be late. Okay, Claire will be late. And Claire will be, that's going to be my block of sound, okay? Claire will be late, right? And it would be the same for everybody here. So I would say, Diego will be late. Adolfo will be late. Raquel will be late. Manuela will be late. Yeah? You're always making that contraction. The reason that it's really important for you to work with these contractions, it's not so much for your speaking, because if you say Claire will be late instead of Claire will be late, everybody's going to understand you, right? It's not a communicative issue. The problem is when somebody says to you, Claire will be late, you might not understand them. So the reason that you want to work on contractions in your speaking and your pronunciation is actually to improve your listening skills, not your speaking skills. Remember, guys, that pronunciation and listening go hand in hand, okay? If you improve pronunciation, you improve listening and vice versa, yeah? So if you can hear a sound, if you can pronounce a sound, sorry, you can hear a sound, okay? That's my little mantra, yeah? If you can pronounce a sound, you can hear a sound, right? And that's why we want to work with them. And it's really hard, especially, you know, at the beginning, because quite often we're visualizing what you want to say and you're like constructing the sentence in your head. And on top of that, to use the pronunciation, I know it's really challenging, but start to try and do that. And a good place to do that is with sort of easier things like, okay, gonna. I'm not going to say going to anymore. I'm going to say gonna. And I'm not going to say I will. I'm going to say I'll. All right. So just start slowly and build it up. Yeah. But it's really important that you work with it. Okay. So what we're going to do to finish now, I'm going to put you into a breakout room, right, with a partner, and you're going to tell your partner your New Year's resolutions that I asked you to write down before. But what I want you to do is be really careful with the pronunciation. All right. So remember our 3 phrasal verbs? Yeah. So we had give up, take up, cut down. Are we using going to or will? Yeah, so we're using going to. And we need to think of that pronunciation of going to, yeah? The gonna, I'm gonna give up, I'm gonna take up, I'm gonna cut down.